Creating objects is really simple in Cinema 4D. All I have to do is just click on the object and it's on the screen. Now these are selection tools, different selection tools in Cinema 4D. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a cube on my scene, and we want to use the selection tools. So let's start with the first selection tool here, which is the live selection tool. I can translate my objects now by playing around with this arrow or axis arrows here. Now these yellow buttons here show me scale values of the object, which I can use to increase the size of the object on a particular axis, on the X, on the Y, on the Z axis. Okay, then after that you can see these other bands around here. If you come up to the viewport window, you see the view menu, you see this filter here. By default, some people's systems don't come with those bands, so you just come to the filter here and click on axis bands. Now these axis bands enable us to move across two axes at a time, and the color of the axis is very important. So basically, if I pick the red axis, it's going to move in every other axis that is not red. If I pick the blue, it's going to move on any axis that's not blue. If I pick the green, it's going to move in every other axis that's not green. So you like move on the red like this. No matter what I do, it doesn't go on the red. It doesn't go to the x-axis. It only goes around the green, the y, or the z axis, the blue one. So I think I'll just go into the four-way screen so that I could show you that in practical. Okay, so we can see the top view, the front view, and the right view, and showing us the axis that it shows, the two axes it shows. So now for the red, when I pick up the red axis band, it's not going to move to the red on any of these two views. So you can see no matter how hard I try, it doesn't move to my right, or to where the red axis is pointing. Now same goes for the blue. If I pick the blue on these orthogonal views, it's not going to move on the blue axis. So no matter how hard I try, I move. And you can see on the top view it's not going up or down. On the right view it's not going left or right. Same happens if I pick the green axis. So if I pick the green axis band, it doesn't go up or down either on the right or the front view. So that is very key in navigating using the axis bands, and it helps us to rightly place objects easily in modeling. So let's just go back to the perspective view. So now we go into the next tool, which is the move tool, and there's actually no difference with the move tool and the live selection, so just one little difference there. As you can see, I can still scale up the objects in a particular axis with the move tool. I can still move around different axes or selected axis. But one thing that the move tool can do is I can actually move the object freely without clicking on the object. So if I just click on this free space here, you can see I'm actually translating the object in a free axis mode. It's not specific to any of the axes. That's why all the axes are on yellow. Now this option, I don't have it with the live selection tool. So I'll just toggle the space bar so that I go back to the live selection tool. Now once I click on the outside of the object, you will notice that the axis handles disappear, the gizmo is no longer showing. And that's because the selection tool has to be on the object. So I toggle back to the move tool, and you can see I can move the object without actually clicking on the object. And this could be very important in the modeling process. So apart from that, they do the same thing. So now we have the scale, which is the short key of T. Now with the scale, we can scale our object in any axis. That's just like we have with the move tool. We can move on any axis. So the scale, you can scale on any axis, like on the green, you can scale on the x-axis, and you can scale on the y-axis. So you could scale the object individually. Then we could also use the axis bands to scale it on two axes per time. But unlike the move tool now, the scale tool works in two modes. So let's come to our mode icons here, and you can see when I click on the black arrow, we have three modes. We have the model mode, the object mode, and the animation. To see what that means, let me create a capsule. Then I'm going to scale it firstly on the model mode, so you see something. When I select that icon and use the scale tool, it's physically changing the properties of the capsule. So take a look at my coordinates as I'm scaling it. The scale is still 1. Nothing is happening. If I come to my object, I can see that my size here and my radius is changing just like in my coordinate manager. But when I change to the object mode, now look at this. On my coordinate manager, the size is changing, but the radius and height in my attribute manager is not changing. The only thing that's changing here is my scale in my attribute manager. The size there, the X, Y, and Z size is changing. So scaling an object in this axis, now when I scale on the red, on the blue, on the green, it moves the object in that specific axis. But if I'm on the model mode and I do that, it will scale uniformly on every axis. And that's very important when it comes to animate. So the rule is never use the scale tool in this object mode unless you are going to be animating the scale. This is very important in modeling. This is a very important point to note. Okay, now we come into the rotation tool, and the rotate tool short key is R. Now you can see we have the color of the bands here based on the axis. We have the red for the x-axis, the green for the green axis, and the blue for the blue axis. So that means I'm rotating around the y-axis, the x or the z-axis. So let me just scale this guy up a little bit so it looks a little more neat. So I can actually shrink the size of the object. So no matter what mode I'm in, it's going to rotate. So whether I'm in the object mode or on the model mode, it's going to rotate. So it doesn't really apply here whether I'm in the object mode or in the model mode. So let's just do something. So now, if I make my rotation on the inner space here between the axis circles and this boundary circle, I'll be able to rotate freely around every axis or any axis, so without specifics on what axis I'm working on. Then if I click on the outside, which is outside of that boundary circle there, I will be able to rotate in what I call the camera view. So I'm rotating based on the camera view, what I am looking at right now. So if I go around my scene and rotate, you'll see the object is just rotating based on the view of my camera at the moment. So this is very important with the rotation tool. We have 3 ways we can rotate, either using the specific axis bands, rotating freely around the axis bands, or rotating based on the camera's view. So based on the camera's view is basically how you are looking at the object. That is the viewport camera is the anchor for the rotation in this technique. So it's a good point to note.